Great. Hi. How is everyone today, this afternoon, Friday? I want to welcome you all to the session this afternoon. My name is Carol Bossert. I'm the Program Director for Science at Cites, the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service. And I want to welcome everyone to our session entitled Specifically today, we want to be talking about the topic of climate change and how we can collaborate across our respective roles to include climate change education. Before I introduce my colleagues and share more about the presentation, I need to do just a little bit of housekeeping. As you probably know, the program is being recorded. The link will be posted on our registration page in the coming days with a notification so you'll be able to access them. Closed captioning is available. You just need to click on the closed caption button on your screen and captions will appear. And at the end of the session, we will ask you to complete the session survey, which you can find by clicking the feedback button on the right side of your screen. During our session today, if you have comments, please use the chat box. And if you have questions for our presenters, please enter them in the Q&A box. And my colleague, Jennifer Brundage, and I will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A. We also have created a Google Doc that has references and resources that you can take away with you. And we hope everyone adds to it to create this collective resource. Next slide, please. And I would like to introduce my fellow presenters. Siobhan Stars from the National Museum of Natural History, Jennifer Collins, also from the National Museum of Natural History, and Jennifer Brundage from Smithsonian Affiliations. But before we get too far into the presentation, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So we have a poll that asks two questions. Do you currently teach about climate change, and in what context do you teach about it? Let's take 1 minute. And when you have a chance, also, please let us know where you're listening from today. Wow, interesting. Great. Oh, it looks like cross curriculum is the most popular, so that's great. That's actually exactly what we want to hear. Jennifer, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Just, it looks like. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is really very helpful. So maybe we can go to the next slide. You know, to put it mildly, I think you'd all agree climate change is and can be a very emotional topic. It can be overwhelming, and it can make us feel powerless, and it can seem very abstract. But There are ways to engage, discuss, and seed hope and encourage action. Many of you know there's a growing body of research about effective ways to do this through human-centered entry points. From ensuring that we identify those areas where we can all agree by telling stories, by immersing and creating real-world experiences. All of these things can make exploring the scientific data more personally relevant, and then offer opportunities for people to take direct action that can make a real impact. Next slide, please. So today, each of us will be sharing an example of a project here at the Smithsonian that offers a different entry point for talking about climate change. After each brief presentation, we'll give everyone a minute to reflect on that particular example and how that applies to your situation. And think about how this resource could be leveraged to improve learning in the classroom. We invite you to post your thoughts in the chat or in the Google Doc, and Jennifer will post that link again. And at the end of the 4 presentations, we're going to have plenty of time for open discussion with all of our panelists and with you. Next slide. So, as I said, my name is Carol Bossert, and much of my job has revolved around developing exhibitions that are hosted by museums and cultural centers around the country. And today I want to share with you a project that I have been working on. It's in the early stages of development, an exhibition project that we hope to begin touring in 2023. Now, I believe, and I have witnessed, that there is a transformational power of exhibitions. Those times when we can see something through someone else's eyes, connect across time and geography, that can inspire questions that start with a what if or I wonder. The opportunity to have human truths that can be applied to our lives. The exhibition, next slide, please. The exhibition, The Story of the Knowing Nature, the Story of the Boreal Forest, has been inspired by recent scientific research that focuses on the Earth's forests as key to understanding the carbon equation that will determine what our future looks like in a changed environment. And this exhibition has also been inspired by people, specifically the actions of the Canadian First Nations, Native Alaskans, and Native Americans that are playing a major role in protecting these forests, motivated by their knowledge and deep-seated beliefs about their relationship to the environment. Next slide, please. Boreal forests are the northernmost forests on the planet. Now, when astronauts, since we have some astronauts circling the globe today, when astronauts look down on the Earth, they see a great green halo that encircles the circumpolar region. These forests are also warming faster than any place on the planet. Knowing Nature focuses primarily on North America's boreal forests and the ways in which we are all connected to it. Next slide, please. Audience will be introduced to the breathtaking beauty, wild animals, trees, the squishy moss, and the northern lights through award-winning photography, sounds, video, and objects. Next slide, please. But most importantly, audience will be introduced to the people that live there and have called this place home for thousands of years. The exhibition will feature their stories, told in their own words about how their traditions and cultures are being directly affected by climate change, but more importantly, how they are actively employing their knowledge of nature to protect this environment. Their stories put a human face on climate change and offer lessons for all of us about the relationships between humans and nature. Next slide. So the exhibition will include an immersive experience. It will be bilingual in English and Spanish. It will include objects, many of them commissioned by Indigenous community members. And we are just beginning now to develop our educational materials. So it is so timely that we have the opportunity to speak to you today about how we can develop activities and programs that support teachers, and even teachers beyond those who can actually visit the exhibition in person. And as someone that has collaborated with teachers for most of my career, I've always been awed by how teachers find ways to leverage museum visits back to the classroom. And I'm so interested in hearing your thoughts. So next slide, please. So if you can just take a minute to reflect on how this topic of empathy fits into your work. And during our you may put that in the chat, or you can just reflect that quietly. During our discussions later in the session, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on how we can leverage this project to include climate change education in the classroom. Remember, you can share your thoughts in the chat or the Google Doc. And now it's my pleasure to invite Siobhan Stars to talk to you about a project at the National Museum of Natural History.
Thanks, Carol. And I'm really excited to be with everyone today. My name is Siobhan, and I develop exhibits with an amazing team of educators at the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum in DC. And I'm really grateful to be with teachers today, particularly because of recent research, including a report just this week from The Lancet about youth experiencing climate dread, youth interest in climate justice and action, and youth as leaders of change who influence adults' perceptions and behaviors. And I know you guys already know this because these are your students, and they're our visitors and the world's future leaders. So what we do really matters. So my question is, how can we use experiences in nature to find shared values, motivate empathy, and inspire civic action? This question is at the heart of a new exhibit, Our Places, Connecting People and Nature, that will open in July 2022 at the museum. Next slide. So our challenge in the exhibit, Our Places, is to connect people together with nature and in nature through nature places where we live, love, work, and play. Through the memories, emotions, and experiences tied to nature, we can motivate people to connect, care, and act. Our visitors and your students ask, what can I do? In my experience, this is a really hard question to answer because of the scale of climate change and the problem people feel. We hope that in Our Places, we can create a safe space for visitors to think about nature experiences and connect together, find themselves in other stories, and provide action steps that are tuned to what they care about. Climate research increasingly indicates that civic actions or even individual actions shared in civic context, audiences can help build self-confidence and resilient communities to produce really meaningful action. And it's so important because climate change is the ultimate threat multiplier that exacerbates a whole host of linked issues that are truly interdisciplinary. And it was exciting to see that so many of you are already doing that kind of cross-curriculum work. And it's why this approach and the activities are as relevant to an art or a history teacher as within a science classroom. So why experience in nature? Because experiences in nature prompt care and action while improving our own lives and communities in the process. Time in nature has a host of positive physical and mental health benefits for your students and even for us as educators, emphasizing that climate change is a people issue. It's our health and our lives. And in nature, people feel less alone. They feel more connected, and reconnecting people into nature and together is what can build resilient communities. So I'm going to share with you all a few of the activities we're testing, but this is an experimental process for the museum. It's really a novel approach, and they're very much in progress. And we are today inviting you to be part of our development team. So try them out together. Try them with your students, your own families and friends, and give us your feedback. I've put some hashtags in our project email in here, and we really want to encourage you to contribute your voice to the exhibit. Next slide. So through our teen engagement work that we've been doing so far over the past year, we found there was a lot of power in teens being inspired to create an authentic, personal nature statement. Teens also feel empowered through this process to lead others and to start communicating. And starting a conversation, we know, is key when it comes to climate change. There's a lot of power in the social normative influence that you can have when you identify yourself as a leader who has an authentic statement to share, and you're now part of a community that cares about nature and people. Even finding someone who shares a healthy fear of snakes is a point of attachment. Teens were also able to empathize with other teens who might have different stories that were unfamiliar to them. Maybe they linked to these social justice issues that research shows teens in particular are very interested in. So unequal access to green space, safety in nature, diabetes and other health conditions linked with climate change and climate justice. So connecting across difference was as important as connecting to the familiar. So we invite you to try out this nature statement approach with your students and tell us what works. Next slide. A step deeper from the statement is the personal nature story, which takes a bit more time and is a deeper dive. So in this rubric, students would be invited to go into nature, a place that's special to them, a place that they visit frequently, or that immediately comes to mind when they're asked to think of nature. And when there, they reflect on a memory, a family connection, or an activity connection that they have to nature that tells their story, the story of their life. Then they write that story, but in a very particular format. They start with a prompt that summarizes the main message. They explain the story in 3 paragraphs of 150 words or less, and they end with a prompt for someone reading it to make a connection and spark their story next. So they're starting something that could go viral. And here's an example for one of the museum's emerging scientists, one of our ornithologists. Next slide. And here's an example from one of our teen interns. Our teens completed a virtual internship last summer, and as part of the assignment, they helped us design this activity that we're sharing, refine it, and then generated their own content. And all of the teen stories that were generated will be in the exhibit, including others that you might be able to help us surface. Next slide. Now that your students have created a statement, a deeper nature story, they can start thinking about what they value and what might be essential rights in the landscape of access to nature that connect with what they value, their statement and their story. So you can see how we're scaffolding experience here. The students can reflect on their story and other stories that they've now been exposed to individually and then in small groups and as a class, and come to consensus on what they consider as essential rights and how they can then think about that in terms of civic action. So what does easy access to green space mean? What does it mean if you don't have access to green space, clean air, water, healthy food? What does it mean if you feel unsafe in nature? And what do they want to do about that? Next slide. And the final activity takes this idea of rights and values and stories one step further into the action space. So now that you have all of this information gathered, what are the action steps aligned with what you value, with your statement and your story that you can take and share civically in your class, in your community, to scale the impact up? How will your students answer the questions for themselves? How can I help? And for others. So the exhibit will feature a number of these How Can You Help panels distributed throughout that rotate and are updated based on visitor contributions. So we hear from our visitors all the time in the museum that the scale of climate change feels daunting, and it can be hard to find an action step that feels meaningful. So if I recycle, is that really going to help? This explores how to develop short, specific, personally relevant and scalable steps that involve civic action in some way. So one example could be for a student, not only am I going to recycle, but I'm going to share that passion with my school's cross-country team because I'm a runner. and encourage them to reduce use of single-use plastics and recycle at future practices and needs. So it can be a very manageable way to start with what students care about, how they identify their superpower. I'm an artist, a runner, a gamer, and then find their contribution and their voice to promote community level change. Next slide. So in the exhibit, we're going to experiment with a broad range of these and other activities. It is going to be a little bit messy, and we really want to invite you to play with us. We found that there is no simple answer to that big question, what can I do? But audiences and teachers joining us in conversation can be a big first step. Next slide. So now I just want to invite all of you to take a moment and reflect about how incorporating nature experiences and civic action, particularly in a cross-curriculum interdisciplinary way, might be able to fit into your classrooms. And if you're already doing this, please, in the Google Doc, share out what you're doing so that other teachers can learn from each other, and we can really create a community in this space. And I just want to thank you all for participating today and the work that you do every day. So in a moment, after reflection, Jen Collins, who is an educator at the Natural History Museum and also a former teacher, is going to share a little bit about her climate work. Thanks, everyone.
And I'm just going to give another moment for people to put down their thoughts, and then I will get rolling. Okay, so thank you so much, Siobhan. So as Siobhan mentioned, I'm Jennifer Collins, and I'm in the Office of Education, Outreach, and Visitor Experience at the Natural History Museum. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been developing for youth and teachers and classes. And the resources I'm going to share, they can all be found in that Google Doc that Siobhan and others have mentioned. And like Siobhan mentioned, I am a former middle school and high school teacher. And, you know, through that lens, maybe some of you can relate, but when I was in the classroom, this teaching about climate change was very limited, and it didn't take place outside of science. But like Siobhan mentioned, it's such an important and ultimate multiplier that the impacts are really integrated into almost everything. So into infrastructure, environmental justice, conservation, the list goes on. So there's just so much opportunity to teach about climate change in a multitude of disciplines and units. And it really looks like from the polls earlier that this is happening across curriculum with a lot of you in this group. And so that's exciting. Next slide, please. Some of you may relate to this, and I certainly want to acknowledge that there are challenges to teaching climate change, and these go way beyond just the ever-present limitations of time, but there are lots of doubts and insecurities that can get in the way. And questions like, you know, how do you keep up with the data? What if somebody questions me and I don't know how to respond? How do I talk about disparity and impacts on vulnerable populations? What types of actions do I connect to? Are they individual ones, community ones, global ones? What's appropriate for students? And really, I think the trick is that we all acknowledge that it is impossible to have all the answers, and all of us are learning and growing as we implement this work. So on that note, we have been trying to frame our work around climate change in terms of these three things listed here: mechanisms, impacts, and solutions. And I think by thinking in those realms, it's sometimes easy to partition and then reintegrate. So each of these elements can really be delved into from a STEM perspective, but also from a civics perspective or an environmental justice perspective. Focusing on mechanisms can get students to think about how climate change works, but also how we're understanding and documenting change. Also about career opportunities. There's a lot of there that people aren't aware of. Stories and examples of impacts can help us build empathy and bring environmental justice into the conversation. And focusing on solutions is where we can really empower students to develop problem-solving skills and enhance both personal engagement, but also inspire, again, career choices. So all of these elements are important and can be taught in different content areas, both independently, but also woven together. And you see this Earth Optimism logo here. This is another way we really are framing our climate work at the museum and across the Smithsonian. Earth Optimism is something that was started here at the Smithsonian, and it's a way of looking at the challenges the planet's facing through the lens of solutions. So rather than emphasizing the doom and gloom of what is wrong, though we do need to acknowledge that, that lens, if it's slowly focused on, can really inhibit action and create stress. But this idea of Earth Optimism, it's really about highlighting the success stories and opportunities as a way to inspire people to get involved and really make change. Next slide, please. So in doing this work, we found some very useful resources that we thought you might be interested in considering if you don't know them already. And we hope that, again, you'll share your ideas and resources in the Google Doc. But for compelling science stories, we draw from research from across the Smithsonian and from other institutions like EPA and NOAA. And it's not just the science stories themselves that we can glean from these resources, but also, very importantly, it's the tangible data sets and visualizations that they offer as really strong and useful learning tools for students. We look at Smithsonian partners like Siobhan and Carol and Jennifer, who you'll meet in just a moment, and different nonprofits like Project Drawdown and local community groups like Casey Trees for their expertise in seeking solutions opportunities and sharing these with students. So when you start looking, actually, it's really amazing all the ways in which solutions are being implemented and innovated locally, nationally, globally. And I don't know how many of you know about Yale's climate work, but their data and findings are really useful for understanding just how public thought and behavior is changing with respect to climate change denial, climate change action, other important societal measures. And this sometimes can be really useful information in designing those conversations and stories that you want to share. So there are also groups learning how people respond to different types of climate change messaging and designing tools useful for educators. And NOKI, or the National Network for Climate Change Interpretation, is one of those groups that we tap into a lot for finding really useful metaphors, for structuring conversations that make talking about climate change easier for both the educator and the audience. So next slide, please. So back to building stories. To build the types of learning experiences for youth that aim to foster change, we think about how to integrate these 4 elements into a story for teaching. Relevant and compelling hooks, current science that is tangible and builds science skills, though the science incorporation can be minimal if you're in content areas outside of science. And then is the story, can we build a story that really fosters empathy across a spectrum of interests and encourages action, while of course drawing on best practice for teaching and learning? So I'm going to share with you an example that's available to all of you, but I also want to encourage you to think about how these elements might be useful in building your own climate stories for your students and what you think that we could offer in the future in terms of this type of storytelling. So Hot Potato, Climate Change, Food Systems, and You is our first digital school program focused on climate change. It's for middle school and high school students, and we launched it during the last school year. It's funded by NOAA and designed by a really amazing team of educators from our school programs and ocean education teams at the museum. So we built this program around food because food is a great hook and can be incorporated in a wide range of content areas. And we focused on potato as the food because most people eat them in some form, and they have great historical, cultural, geographic connections. So it has the potential to really appeal across different student interests in different ways. So potatoes also work really well because of the science showing how crops are being impacted by changes in regional precipitation. And this is affecting a lot of different people, farmers, consumers, distributors, and others. So it's a real world problem that connects to many. What also makes potatoes great is that there are easy to find data sets like temperature graphs and maps showing trends that students can really successfully interpret. And there are people actively engineering solutions, so we can draw students in and get them to think about not only theoretical solutions, emphasizing the need for creative problem solving, but also inspire them to find the role that they can play within their communities to have an impact, much like Siobhan was talking about just a moment ago. And then in terms of best practice, encouraging opportunities throughout for students to share their own ideas and thoughts and make connections, which, as we know in the digital world, means polls and chats and a bit more opportunities in in-person situations. Okay, next slide, please. So finding the direct connections so people care and really providing opportunities for sharing different perspectives around a problem are important elements of the Hot Potato program, but also for another program I just wanted to highlight, and that's the Teen Earth Optimism digital series. These are hour-long programs that are facilitated conversations with leaders in their fields, and you can see from this list, there's a wide range of topics that we've focused on. Each one of these aims to inform, empower, and inspire the audience using compelling stories of success. And so integrated into the conversations are opportunities for the audience to think about their own connections, which during the live programs they can contribute to. As archive programs, we're hoping they're really good teaching tools to foster conversations within the classroom. And next slide, please. And I just wanted to finish by going back to this concept that integrating climate change into teaching is really critical, and it can be challenging, but it does require all hands on deck and to all of us to think creatively about how we can do this. But recognizing that this can be challenging for some and more so for some than others, we really tried to lower the barrier by creating a climate change communication WebEx course that gives really entry-level information and examples on climate mechanisms, climate impacts, climate solutions, and then also touches on effective communication strategies. And I point this out because it is free and available to anyone. And so it is there for your use should you be interested. And next slide, please. So my reflection prompt really is having think about the storytelling piece and how this might be incorporated into the work that you do. So I'll give you a moment here and then we'll turn it over to Jennifer Brundage from Affiliations. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And thank you everyone for your great comments in the chat. I can't wait till we can hear more about them. And thanks for populating the Google Doc too. My name is Jennifer Brundage. As you've heard, I work in Smithsonian Affiliations, which is a national outreach unit of the Smithsonian. And I'm going to echo many of the elements of what my colleagues have shared today, and that's the importance of youth action and using Earth optimism as a means to inspire that action. And what I'm going to share today is an educational model for you to consider that was designed to cultivate action and leadership among youth to lead environmental projects of their own that have real and lasting impacts, yes, on their communities, but also on their development as activists as well. And as we know, as we've heard already today, young people care deeply about the environment, but they often don't know where to start taking action. So since 2019, and that is throughout the pandemic, the Smithsonian, through its national network of partners, has prototyped a model with a variety of different communities across the United States, urban and rural, large and small. And we believe that the strategies and the results that I'm going to share here can really be replicated and scaled anywhere. And as Jennifer said, we also believe that the framework of Earth Optimism really resonates with students. We focused on high school students, but Earth Optimism focuses on hope and action and agency, and it also plays into young people's strengths of sharing their successes widely on social media and among their peers to inspire others. Next slide, please. So together with our partners, and these are organizations that are available to any educator because they're in every community, and that is museums, after-school spaces, schools, science education, and nature centers. We started by introducing students to the environmental stewards all around them in their own town. And this might be nonprofit organizations such as the local bike association or a conservation group, or it may be local farmers, compost companies, or beekeepers, or even the chapters and offices of larger organizations like the field office of the Bureau of Land Management, or a national park that's nearby, or the local chapter of a Sierra Club. And making these introductions, teaching students how to network carries several benefits with it. First of all, students see how climate issues are impacting their local communities directly and specifically. And this might manifest in beach cleanups or habitat restoration, or finding out where the food deserts are. What are food deserts and where are they in our town? This approach uses the community itself, whether that's their school, their town, or their state, as the classroom, and exposes them to how global climate issues are playing out in their own backyard. Secondly, in networking with professionals in climate work, students, as we've mentioned before, begin to become aware of academic and career opportunities. And we anticipate and we hope that the green economy will only continue to grow in decades to come. So through this networking, they might hear about an internship, a volunteer or service opportunity, and about the pathways that professionals have taken to get where they are. And finally, and most importantly, to us, we're mentors as well as educators. And it's important to us that students see themselves in this space as activists in their own right and as civic leaders in climate work. And to encourage this leadership aspect, we want to convey the agency that students have to formulate their own solutions and to impress upon them how important their ideas and their voices are. And as we heard over and over from our student collaborators, we don't think of these as teen solutions. We want to validate and develop their ideas as important, critical to the community at large, because it takes everyone's effort to achieve the change that's needed. So in the next slide, you can see to accomplish this goal, we challenged youth teams to working with our partners to ideate their own action plans for the environment, and then to present them, in our case, to a jury of activists that the Smithsonian convened. And in doing so, students competed for small micro grants to realize their vision. This was a critical component of the model because it gave students a goal by which to research an issue and the possible solutions they wanted to propose, and then to negotiate and collaborate with each other to come to a consensus. They had to prepare a persuasive presentation and a budget, and to justify their project in real time with questions from the jury. Now, the Smithsonian had grant money to do this, but you can imagine perhaps how this might work with any group of students presenting to a student council or a school board, school administrators, or to a city agency or community foundation for support. And as I've witnessed throughout my career, when you empower passionate young people, your best bet is to get out of their way because they will rise to the occasion in impressive and unexpected ways. On this slide, you can see some of the results of this pilot model. Several teams ran their own virtual summits for their peers, featuring the professionals that they had networked with. Other teams started social media feeds on TikTok and Instagram, of course, to raise awareness of local issues and the actions they were taking. And they've now transformed those tools into organizing in-person gatherings where safe. We saw teams of high school students transform their school campus into gardens for indigenous pollinator plants. And another created that super cute logo for a compost program they're piloting for their school. So in each case, from Anchorage to Miami and from Massachusetts to New Mexico, the student teams, with the help of mentors, which was a critical component, have formed their own local ecosystem of support. And these supporters in their town are both financial. They help them get press and more awareness of what they're doing, and of course, educationally. And there is invested in their success as we are. And so I just want to mention that for more details and case studies from this pilot, I'd encourage you to check out a resource on the Smithsonian's Learning Lab, Earth Optimism Youth Action. And I think it's also on the Google Doc, and Carol is going to put it in the chat. And so with that, I'll ask to take us to the next slide to open up a share out. We've seen some amazing things in the chat and a discussion of how we can all help students address climate change together.
Thanks, Jennifer. And as I think we've been sharing some really wonderful comments and conversations between the speakers and our participants. I wanted to bring everyone's attention to the Yale Climate Connection Program webpage that has a number of stories that I think could be very helpful for students. I also really hope that we can hear that Renee Kelly will send us a little bit more information about sky ponds, wetlands, and a nature trail that she was doing. But one of the questions, Sivan, that came up during your presentation was whether there will be a virtual exhibition related to your project.
What a great question. And I think that we've definitely would like to consider digital outreach, particularly through social media. Jen mentioned things that are natively used by teens, and it would be great to have teens kind of initiate and drive that. So TikTok, Instagram, those types of platforms. And we do have our hashtags, hashtag our places and hashtag NMNH. And so we invite you all and your teens to start the ball rolling. We also, I don't know if you're familiar, but the museum has a do-it-yourself model of traveling shows where we provide content digitally. And that's something that I think the museum is considering. And we're really excited to be working with sites as well on this project. So we'll see what happens. I think if there's a lot of interest out there, it's a likely chance.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sivan. Again, CITES is very excited to be working with natural history as well and affiliations to expand our impact in this this very big challenge. So I do hope that everyone is having an opportunity to share and put some additional notes on in the Google Doc. I know there have been several questions about what will be available beyond just the transcript. There will be access to the chat as well as to the Google Doc. So, and I want to draw your attention to Betty Belanis mentioned that the Folklife Festival in 2022 is all going to be about Earth optimism. And I've gone ahead and put that link into the Google Doc. It's also in the chat. I'm really excited, Betty, that we're going to have an opportunity to have a real Folklife Festival again and focus it on Earth optimism. So I'm wondering if we could have the next slide, please. And of course, if there are any other questions, please go ahead and post those in the chat. Some of our, what we are really committed to working with teachers and making this cross collaboration in our educational ecosystem. I suppose one question I would have is if you could ask the Smithsonian to do anything to help you in the classroom, what would that be? That might be something to think a little bit more about. It was very, very encouraging to hear, see in the poll that there were so many of you that really are working on cross curriculum connections between civics and engagement. So that has been wonderful. We have just a couple more minutes, so I will start to wrap up here. May I have the next slide, please? I always, in environmental education, I always like to think about, what those take-home messages were for us. And this seems like these are very obvious for our group. It is certainly just more than science. There are many, many entry points, and of course, we just really touched on 4. There are so many more entry points in talking about climate change and civics and environmental justice. And it sounds as if many of you are working on those things as well. It takes collaboration, and we're here to help, and we're here to learn. I hope this presentation today and our brief time together really does continue on in stronger relationship building amongst the 4 of us and all of you. I know Jennifer is putting our email addresses in the chat, and those will be available to you. And so whether you're working here within the Smithsonian or across the country, we really do want to hear from you. It does, to use the hackneyed term, it takes more than a village. So final slide is thank you, thank you, thank you.